I've been taking part in game jams frequently for about 2 years. In that time, I've taken part in 4 Ludum Dares and even won a trophy in one of them. I've also entered a number of other itch.io hosted jams such as the GitHub Game Off and JamDNA jams. Over the course of those jams, I've learned a lot about short-term game development, and so I thought I'd offer a little advice if, for example, you're thinking of taking part in your first game jam. Although, I think even frequent jammers should gain something from one of these tips. Don't settle for your first idea. Your first idea could be fantastic, but it could also be the most obvious interpretation of the theme, and that means you'll be unlikely to perform well in the rankings if there are tens of similar games all doing relatively the same thing. Because when people are rating, it can get a bit tiresome seeing the same game in a different skin over and over again, so really try and get creative with your interpretation. Don't allow feature creep to set in, and try and prioritise. Break your game down into a list of the things that are completely necessary and a list of the things that you would like to include, but aren't really essential. This gives you a clear scope of what needs to be done first, and forces you to think about whether you can get all of the list done in time. You'll get better at gauging this as you take part in more jams and the more post-jam analysis that you do. Do what you know. Don't use a game jam as an excuse to learn a new engine or program, because the standard sized game jams, which tend to be between 24 and 72 hours long, you won't really have the time to spare if you get stuck. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to learn something new whilst taking part. Just make sure that you understand how to do the majority of what you intend to make beforehand. If you're taking part in a longer form game jam, which can be a week or a month long, then that's when you should try and tackle something substantial that's new to you. Have some sort of a tutorial. A key issue with game jam games is that the instructions for playing are either too complex or not obvious. My entry for Ludum Dare 41 suffered from having controls that were just too complex for someone to learn and enjoy in such a small amount of time. So try and provide a simple tutorial, or at a minimum a list of controls on the game page, because people will spend somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes playing your game, which for complex systems might be too little amount of time for them to learn it properly. Make sure you sleep. People are very tempted to just ensure that they spend every single minute on the jam. Sleeping will make you more efficient in the long run. On top of this, I would really recommend taking regular short breaks so that you don't get into a rut and actually give yourself a bit of time to relax. I find that during those breaks, or going off to sleep, I tend to think of something cool that I can add to the game later, or I figure out how to fix an issue that I encountered earlier on. Set the submission page up early. Setting up your submission page well before the end is actually one of the more important tips for game jams. If you frequent any of the game jam discords, you'll see a plethora of people panicking in the last few minutes, and even past the deadline, about trying to get their page done and their game uploaded. Get it done early, because it prevents you from having to rush near the end. It reduces the stress of the final hour a bit, and then you only have the game to upload. Don't worry if you can't finish. People voting in the jam will know that you've been limited by time, and they'll look at your work for what it is, which is something that has been created in a very short amount of time. If your game is unique, then it will speak for itself, even if it's unfinished. And as with all game jams, you can learn something from an unfinished game. You can sit back and analyse where you lost time, or determine whether something like feature creep set in. Try your best to make a web browser version. The majority of people prefer to play and review a web browser version, and so by providing one, you'll make it easier for you to get votes and feedback. Another tip, if you're using the Unity engine, is to make a Windows, Mac and Linux version. It doesn't take much time, but people really do appreciate the option. Engage in the voting system. Play other people's games and provide them with quality feedback. This will help you to get your own games reviewed, and will also make you think about the different ways that other people have interpreted the theme. You may see some mechanics when playing other people's games that would work nicely in a future game jam game. But most of all, just have fun. If you're not having fun, why bother? Learn some small things, become more efficient at developing games, and just enjoy the process. And there we are. Those are all the tips I have right now. If you've taken part in game jams before and you have any advice that I missed, let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching.